Hey everybody, I hope you're having a good holiday. So I wanted to share something new with you, something that's interesting and not something that I have to do. Um, so I remembered that, if you remember, I've been showing you this geometry a lot with Metatrons cube, and I figured out that a lot of this artwork that you see, whether it be ancient Egyptian reliefs like I've shown you, or whether it's stuff we see in cathedrals. Like, here's the perfect example of a Buddha, and you can see that the halo around his head is actually fitting in one of those rings right there. And if you look at his body, you can see that the angles of these triangles, for example, they follow his shoulders, and you can see how this X right here follows the cross in his legs. So these artists, they designed this art, their statues and all this kind of stuff, all the way back into ancient times, Babylonian, the Assyrian relief, all these types of things. And if you use Metatron's cube on them, you'll find that you can decode a lot of this stuff. So Metatron's cube is very interesting in itself because it yields all the Platonic solids, but there's also something else that I remembered that it yields. Now, if I go through some of these images here, I just want to show you what you can do. If you get the geometry correct here, you can do this. Okay, so here's Jesus. You can see the halo around his head, and you can see in the middle it's pointing right towards the heart, right? Now, when you get the geometry correct, then you can do stuff like this, and you can see that it matches up perfectly because half of it is the Buddha and the other half is Christ. This is what good geometry can show you when you use it. So we keep going through some of this stuff, and I want to show you this. This is stained glass right here, and it shows the Tetragrammaton. The reason they show him on the cross and the reason they show him in this right here is because the tree of life is actually divided into worlds, but the one tree of life itself can be divided into 4 sections. Now, these are Hebrew letters, and this stands for Yahweh, right? And this is the way, if you stack it, how it looks. If you put it in tetragrammaton form, then it looks like this. So this is like the Tetractys, like Pythagoras. So this is what shows that this Kabbalah stuff goes back really far. So if you take a look at it in another aspect, the Trinity is on the outside. So these top 3 that you see right here are actually on the outside of the triangles here. And on the inside, you have this hexagram with the sun in the center, but this is actually also a cube. Okay, so this is kind of interesting to know. And then this cube, as you can see, it actually unfolds into a cross. This is important for what I want to show you today. So let's go through a couple more images here. As you can see, I've been using this Metatron's cube to decode a lot of this stuff. I figured out that these halos around their head, they fit in these things a lot of times. Sometimes you'll see a larger one and you'll see a smaller one. And that's kind of showing you like the child or Jesus in the hexagram, and you'll see the mother figure up here. So if we continue to go through some of these, this is from a Buddha I was looking at, Tetractys. Here's another image of a Buddha using this Metatron's cube. You can see how the geometry, his legs crossing, all this stuff fits in perfectly. This is actually the architecture inside an old cathedral, and you can see it's shaped just like a triangle, so I'll place it on Metatron's cube to see what type of stuff you can expose. So this Metatron's cube ends up acting as a good key. Now this is Amiens Cathedral. Yeah, this is Amiens Cathedral. Now, if you remember the video I showed you called The Real Sun, this is the one that was backed by Timothy Hogan, he is the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And he had a video series out a while back where he went speaking at a particular church and was showing that these cathedrals are they're shaped like man, in other words. And this was something that I had already been finding myself in these cathedrals. And one thing that I noticed was very interesting is that the head of all these cathedrals, where the high altar is, you see the nebula. That's what you see. And that gives us a good idea of what is happening as far as symbolism goes as creation begins and as it moves its way down to earth, which we will go over when we start touching more into the Kabbalah tree of life. But here's an example of this is Amiens Cathedral. And the reason I have eastward there is to let everybody know when they place the sword eastward, where the garden in the eastward area of the Garden of Eden. If you look up east or eastward in the King James Bible in the Strong's Concordance, what you find is eastwards means the most ancient. So it means at the very front or the very beginning area. It doesn't mean like in the direction east. These are a lot of things that people don't realize about the Bible. You have to look in that Strong's Concordance and you have to find out what these things mean. Otherwise, you take it literally and you get it wrong. This is, I'm sure you're familiar with this one by now. This is Leonardo da Vinci. I know he was experimenting with the, and this is the reason why this ties to some of the stuff I've been showing you, is because I could tell by the way he had his arms, what he was trying to do was, he was playing around with Metatron's cube, but he was also showing something related to the Tree of Life. I want you to take a look at the leaflets in the Flower of Life behind him right there. And if you notice, they're in the same angle as his arms. But these arms are also in the same angle as what you see when you take a look at the Tree of Life and the various Sephiroth. What he was imitating was he was showing Christ on the cross, in my opinion. He was showing Christ on the cross. He was showing the Tree of Life, the angle of the arms. He was also showing something regarding the squared circle. He was showing a lot of different things in this. But I noticed particularly that his arms being the way that they were very similar to, if not almost exactly the way you see Christ on all these famous painting crucifixions. And when you take a look at a lot of these crucifixion images, you see the sun and the moon above the cross. And that's a clear giveaway that what you're looking at is something alchemical, which means that they're showing you some kind of a code. And it also gets back to Hermes and the Emerald Tablet. His father is the sun, his mother is the moon. And we'll go over some more of that when we start taking a look at Kabbalah. Here's another image experimenting with this. Christ on the cross. You can see how his arms, the way the geometry is. And if you take a look, like if you just look at various sections of him, his head, the top of his head should be reaching this bar right here. You'll notice that this area, that's the triangular area right here, this is the area that refers to his private parts or what have you. What I've noticed is what they do is when they nail his foot down here, the guys that are doing good geometry will usually nail it somewhere to the base of the sun, because we're up here, he's above the sun, right? He's already moved all the way up to his arm stretching into Bina over here and into wisdom over here. So he's risen from the sun down here all the way up to the top, right? This right here, which is his heart area, this refers to Doth, and that refers to Gnosis or knowledge. Okay, so here's another one right here. You can see the way his head is leaning in there follows the curvature. You can also see the way that the curvature of this circle follows the same curvature of his robe, I guess, that he's wearing. You can see the same area, and you can see his foot is nailed in the area of the sun again. A lot of times when they nail his foot, because his foot is pointing downwards, the nail is to show you where the bottom of the heel is. So if you were to compare this, for example, to Vitruvian Man, then Vitruvian Man stands flat-footed. So if you wanted to put this image right next to the Vitruvian Man, you would put the nail where the bottom of his foot is, so that way you would know that you were at the heel level, if that makes any sense. These are all things I look at when I'm looking at the geometry, so if it's too much information, just skip over it. And this is one by Salvador Dali. Okay, now this gets to what I wanted to show you. So actually I want to show you this one last photo. This is what I was just talking about, where they nail his foot. They nail his foot right there at the base of the circle. See that? And you can see that the ends of the cross right here where his hands are stretched to, this is exactly the same geometry that Vitruvian Man was doing. And so what I did was I did an overlay to show you. Now Jesus' head's always hangs to the side. But you can see that if it were straight up, it would be right at the top of this cross. And if you look at their arms, the way Vitruvian Man is overlaid, his chest, I've even got this right here where you can see it on the outside. And his legs all the way down, you can see that the geometry is the same. So it was my opinion that he was experimenting with Metatron's cube. So that brings me to what I wanted to show you today. So here is an image of Christ on the cross again that we just saw, and I'm kind of giving you a close-up so you can really get a good look at the geometry here. You can see where his head is leaning. It kind of follows that curve. You can see that this disc right here follows the same curvature of his robe that he's wearing. The triangular area refers to the private parts. And this is right down here is at the base of the sun. And you always see this woman right here. If you notice, her head is level with what we see right here. If Jesus were, if this cross were longer, what her head represents, when you take a look at Kabbalah, is it represents the earth. And the reason why it represents that is because the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life have masculine and feminine designations. Up here, this is unity, this is Kether. This is Chokmah, this is wisdom, and this is masculine. That's why it's the sun. Okay. Sometimes, like I said, they have it reversed. Here they have it reversed. But it's the sun, it's masculine. Over here is Bina. She is understanding, and so she takes the wisdom and she understands it and she organizes it. Then we have Doth, which takes that abstract and then it puts it into actual use. Okay. So then all the way down, so all these Sephiroth that he's in here right here, these are all considered masculine. And then down here, the earth, the last one, and this is obviously the sun right here, but I'm just trying to show you for the sake of argument here. So if this were the very bottom Sephiroth right here, then her head represents the earth and it's feminine. So this is the kind of the way that they encoded this stuff. But, okay, so here's what I want to show you now. The image that you see, which is Metatron's cube here, is also the Star of David, right? Commonly misunderstood as other things, and so it is also many of the Platonic solids. But what I remember, there was a famous artist in the 1950s that created something, and I want to show you kind of how all this now ties together with Metatron's cube. You're probably familiar with Salvador Dali's. It's called Crucifixion Corpus Hypercubus in 1954. So I was like, aha, so that means that Metatron's cube has the hypercube. And there it is right there. And so if we take a look at the hypercube, if it's unfolded, just like I showed you earlier, the regular cube unfolds into a 2D cross. The hypercube unfolds into a 3D cross. So I don't think there's a mistake that this whole Metatron's cube being the key to a lot of these pieces of art is something to be looked at. Now, there's a lot of the symbolisms out there, you know, and I just don't think a lot of people have put a lot of the pieces together. I think some people have put some of them together, but that's one of the reasons why I like to look at all this old art and what I see in cathedrals and all the way back to what we see in reliefs, is because it gives you information. So I think we're getting a little bit closer to the truth about what's going on here. And the geometry, as you can see, is extremely important. I hope you guys have a great holiday, and I'll talk to you soon.